Hello, my name is Ethan Hine. My topic is fairness in sports, transforming the perception of transgender athletes. In the song Blowin' in the Wind, Bob Dylan says, yes, and how many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? This is what most people do when they're faced with the issue of transgender athletes in sports. Many believe it is not fair because of the advantages they have. Martina Navratilova, who is the winner of 18 Grand Slam titles, states, I am happy to address a transgender woman in whatever form she prefers, but I would not be happy to compete against her. It would not be fair. This topic has been researched extensively by experts such as Robinson Meyer, Sarah Teasel, and Andrew Latham. This begs the question, should transgender women be allowed to compete in sports against cisgender women? This led me to my thesis of transgender women should not be allowed to participate in sports without any hormone treatment to make the playing field as fair as possible. Men and women are physically different, and men have the advantage in almost every sport. For centuries, it has been clear that men have natural physical characteristics that women do not. What has been found to be one of the main differences between men and women is androgen levels, specifically testosterone levels. According to the Harvard Health Publishing of the Harvard Medical School, testosterone is directly related to muscle size and strength along with bone size and strength. Moreover, because of the difference in testosterone levels between men and women, men have advantages that are critical to success in many sports. According to a Medical News Today article by Claire Sissons, she agrees that testosterone is critical for the development of strengthening of muscles and bones, and found that the average man aged 19 and older has between 240 and 950 nanograms per deciliter, while the average woman in the same age category only have between 8 and 60 nanograms per deciliter. This advantage is shown through data regarding world records for both men and women. Robinson Meyer, who is a magazine journalist with years of experience covering media and technology companies, states in an article that women's world records are only 9% that of men's world records in both short and long distance swimming and short and long distance running. Even though some current women's world records match those of men's 50 years ago, this can be explained by improved training methods and nutrition. Transgender women competing in sports with cisgender women without the use of hormone treatment creates an unfair competitive environment. Imagine being a woman finishing in second place behind a transgender woman, knowing that this individual received chemicals which enhance performance for which they were not allowed. The National Collegiate Athletic Association has rules regarding transgender athletes because they believe there is a clear advantage that transgender women have over cisgender women without the use of hormone treatment. According to the NCAA policy on transgender student-athlete participation, a trans female athlete being treated with testosterone suppression medication for the purposes of the NCAA competition may continue to compete on a men's team but may not compete on a women's team without changing it to a mixed team status until completing 1 calendar year of testosterone suppression treatment. This policy is similar to the International Olympic Committee's policy regarding hormone treatment and making the playing field as fair as possible. The IOC states in their transgender athlete policy that the athlete must demonstrate that her total testosterone level in serum has been below 10 nmol per liter for at least 12 months prior to her first competition. The athlete's total testosterone level in serum must remain below that 10 nmol per liter throughout the period of desired eligibility to compete in the female category. These policies were put into place because of the perceived advantage that transgender women have over cisgender women, making competition as fair and equitable as possible. However, the NCAA's policy is strictly for college sports in the United States, and the IOC's policy is for the Olympics, even though a few other sports have implemented similar policies for their sport. However, there is a different policy by the National Brand of University Sports in Canada's policy. As of September 26, 2018, it states, student athletes will be eligible to compete on the team that corresponds with either their sex assigned at birth or their gender identity, provided that the student athlete complies with the Canadian anti-doping program. This policy makes it so no hormone treatment is necessary and transgender women can participate in women's sports without restriction, with the exception that they have to comply with Canada's anti-doping program. Allowing transgender women to compete with other cisgender women is unfair to the cisgender women and hurts the feminist movement. If transgender women competed with cisgender women, there would no longer be equality because you have someone that was born male competing against cisgender women and able to have an advantage, while cisgender women that would become a transgender man and compete with cisgender men would not be able to have the same advantage. This is why the IOC's transgender policy, they state, those who transition from female to male are eligible to compete in the male category without restriction. It may also be unfair to cisgender women because of Title IX. According to the American Civil Liberties Union, Title IX was put into place to ban sex discrimination in school programs. This policy was put into place because of the disparity between the treatment of men and women. However, this policy may turn against them with the transgender athletes because it infers that allowing transgender athletes to participate in the sport in which they identify is gender discrimination. According to a BBC article by Alistair Magwan, Hannah Mountsie, who was a transgender Australian rugby player, was banned from being nominated for the Women's Australian Rules Draft because of the disparity in size between her and her opponents. She then went on to play handball, where her size and strength still benefits her in many ways. It was seen that she had advantages, but because of the inclusion, they allowed her to play for their international handball team, which is unfair to the teams and athletes she competes against. Some may argue that transgender women have no advantage over cisgender women because of the notion that testosterone does not correspond with athletic performance. According to Rachel McKinnon, who is a transgender athlete, researchers Stephanie Berman and Yavis Gardner tested over 2,000 IAAF World Championship track athletes, and their study showed that there's absolutely no relationship between testosterone in terms of performance in males. They state that the relationship they found in women was weak and sporadic. However, the information presented by these scholars is flawed. Some athletes use testosterone doping to give themselves advantage which they would not otherwise have. According to the Sport Journal by P.J. Vanny, who is a third-year sports management doctorate student at the United States Sports Academy, and Dr. Jordan Moon, who is the Muscle Farm Sports Science Center Research Institute director. They state that in terms of testosterone doping, if they do not get caught, they will most likely experience individual success, team success, and an increase in salary if playing for a professional sports team. There have been times in history where having a higher testosterone level showed in female athlete performance. According to the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, these scientists conclude after the 1972 Olympic Games in Munich that the effects of the treatment with androgenic hormones were so spectacular, particularly in female athletes, in strength-dependent events, that few competitors using drugs had a chance of winning. A solution to this problem could be to implement the International Olympic Committee's policy to all of the sports organizations worldwide that lack a hormone treatment policy. This will make the playing field even on a global scale, so when those transgender athletes from their respective country are looking to participate in the Olympics, they meet the qualifications of the IOC's policy. A limitation to this solution would be very hard to get agreement from all countries that the IOC's policy is needed for their sport of their respective country. Another solution, which was presented by Sarah Tietzel, whose research has been recently funded by the International Olympic Committee, the World Anti-Doping Agency, and the Canadian Center for Ethics in Sports, states that more research needs to be done about female transgender athletes. There is not a lot of information out surrounding the direct correlation between testosterone in women and their athletic performance. In Canada's 83-page anti-doping policy that was revised in 2015, the words testosterone and androgen are not mentioned once. A limitation to this solution would be that it may take a lot of time and research before a definite solution is presented.
Okay, Ethan, first question. How did you handle the different perspectives in order to reach your conclusion?
So I had different perspectives in my different claims, and they all, in terms of like testosterone, some argued that it was directly related to muscle size, and some talked about how the advantages in sports and how like different records showed because of that advantage. In my counterclaim, I talked about how the testosterone had, they argued that the testosterone had no advantage, but then I was able to refute that with the world records again.
Okay. Thanks. And then if you had more time, what additional research would you conduct related to the issue?
I would have looked at transgender men and the effect that they have on sports. I did not choose to implement them because it would have been too much for what I had, and I would have not been able to have time to implement that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.